Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to the Horus Heresy lore breakdown, when we are now on The Lion short story in the latest compilation. And to everyone's surprise, it is not a novel about the Lion L. Johnson at all. In fact, it is instead a short story detailing the life and achievements of Horus Lupercal's favoured pet cat, who was given the moniker the Lion after having particularly violently savaged a mouse right on top of the War Master's writing desk. Or alternatively, and far more boringly, in my not-so-humble opinion, it is exactly what it sounds like, and it is in fact a book about Lionel Johnson. But let's be honest here, you kind of would be interested in hearing about Horus Lupercal's cat, now wouldn't you? Especially if your only two choices was the cat of Horus Lupercal or the pussy that cries on the rock. Alright. To be fair to the Lion, okay, I do rip into him a fair bit for his modern day 40k lore, which is atrocious. I mean, he's literally been moping for 10,000 years, to the point that Gilliman returned before him. But in 30k, he is far more of an interesting and Chad individual, to be certain. And may I also just point out how ridiculous it is that Games Workshop was like, okay, well, I mean, one of the Primarchs is not only still alive, but we know precisely where he is. Let's skip him and bring Gilliman back instead. Right. Well, I mean, technically speaking, Gilliman wasn't completely dead, so alright. Fair enough. It only needed a bit of Eldar witchcraft to get him back on his feet, so, you know, simple dimples. Anywho, let's get into the short story. We rejoin the Lion shortly after his fight with Conrad Kurz on the planet of Tsugulsa. I swear, I literally need to tear my throat a little bit every time I need to pronounce that godforsaken name. Tsugulsa. Who came up with that? Anywho, he has recovered from the grievous injuries inflicted to him by Kurz, and Kurz presumably has done the same, but the mental damage inflicted has proven to be perhaps a little bit more complicated to overcome. Conrad Kurz had mocked the Lion. He had asked whether or not the Lion could truly know whether or not his proud angels remained loyal. And he had asked whether or not the Lion could be completely sure of their loyalty, considering they were on the other side of the galaxy and all that. Of course, at first, the Lion had dismissed this as nothing more than Conrad trying to bait him, but considering recent events, trust was becoming a scarce commodity. The Lion also notes that he never had much in the way of trust to begin with, but certain levels of fealty and loyalty had restricted him. When Petarabo had shown up to claim the mighty siege engines that the Lion at great effort and risk to himself had saved from the claws of Horus Lupercal, for example, the Lion had simply handed them over, for Petarabo was his brother, and why should he distrust him? That was a mistake, now wasn't it? And that had jaded the Lion quite a little bit. And when you add on that, of course, the betrayal of Horus Lupercal, of Alfarius, of Omegon, of all the other Primarchs that fell, it's small wonder that the Lion is starting to get a wee bit paranoid at this point in time. And since the Night Lords once again refused to be brought to battle, the Lion's thoughts turn ever more homewards. He really, really, really wants to scratch that itch of mistrust. If for no other reason than to ensure himself that no, his father hasn't actually betrayed him. And in this context, by the way, by father, I refer, of course, to Luther rather than the Emperor, since he was the adoptive father of the Lion. Of course, there had already been a little bit of a betrayal there, some bad blood certainly, but it's clear that the Lion had not yet completely given up on his adoptive father. And then, as he sits there wondering how the hell he can bring the Night Lords to battle and finally finish this seemingly endless campaign, he is brought news of a complement of Death Guard and Iron Hands near a system that the Lion knows well, a system that he himself claimed, and that was outlawed by the Emperor. More precisely, any knowledge of the system was supposed to be kept secret from the legions due to the nature of the research that was to be undertaken there. Research that the Lion considers so valuable that he sees in it an opportunity to end the never-ending war with the Night Lords. He sends himself and a total of 30,000 Dark Angels to intervene in the conflict between the Death Guard and the Iron Hands. Pointedly, he mentions that they should bring enough forces to overwhelm anything the Death Guard or the Iron Hands could bring to bear, which shows again that the Lion is getting to be a rather suspicious, crotchety old man. But then again, considering the times, that is hardly a bad idea. He also mentions that he'd completely forgotten about this system, which I do... See, Gav Thorpe is one of those authors that he's pretty good. He's pretty damn good, but he's a little hit and miss, and he tends to occasionally forget some things, which is ironic because in this case, the Lion forgetting about this system is a literal impossibility, since all of the Primarchs have quite literally 100% perfect recall. And if indeed the system may provide some solution to the war against the Night Lords, there is no fucking way the Lion would not have come up with this sooner, but hey, plot convenience and all that, I guess we can excuse it. And whilst heading towards this new battlefront, the Lion also encountered something else strange. A ship, or presumably a ship, is following the Lion's vessel through the warp. A supposed impossibility, though it is an impossibility I have seen used frequently in Black Library novels, so, impossible only when the plot does not demand it to be possible. Hell, I've even read the Black Library novels where ships have boarded one another in the warp. I believe, in fact, that there was even one in the Horus Heresy a bit earlier on. So, impossible, quote-unquote, but it is a plot point here, and the Lion orders that the trailing ship be lost. But it sticks to them. Despite the evasive maneuvers taken by the Dark Angel's vessel, the trailing ship is still there, and so the Lion decides to try something a little more extreme. The Lion's flagship will undergo a series of drastic evasive maneuvers to draw their quarry closer in behind them, and then the ship will engage in an emergency real-time translation, the equivalent of a submarine crash dive, except of course in this case it's back into reality. A very drastic and dangerous maneuver at the best of times. The idea is that the sudden, dramatic, and brutal real-time translation will create a literal warp rift that will pull the enemy vessel in alongside the Dark Angel ship and therefore drag them into reality. It is a bit of an Hail Mary, but it works out. And the mysterious pursuer turns out to be a Night Lord's vessel. A rather interesting one as well. The Dark Angel navigator mentions that she is noticing an unfamiliar pattern in the enemy's void shields and drives, as if there are void entities existing within the ship itself. Shortly thereafter, the Dark Angel vessel comes under attack by enemies apparently able to shift through solid walls. The first reaction by the Lion is to suppose that this is a desperate teleportation assault by the Night Lords, who have also overloaded their own warp engines, causing yet further instabilities. But when the Dark Angels respond to the invasion, they discover demons running rampant through the halls of their ship. This appears to be pretty much the first time that the Dark Angels encounter this sort of resistance, and a couple things happen now very, very quickly and over the course of, well, practically no time whatsoever, really. So, first and foremost, the Navigator and her guards fight their way to the command bridge, using their third eyes to defeat the demons because, of course, those are psychic attacks and so prove to be very effective. Additionally, one of the previous members of the Dark Angels, Librarius, also utilizes his power against the Edict of Nicaea in a moment of desperation to banish demons as well. This is very intriguing to the Lion, who asks whether or not the immaterial arts can be used to defeat these invaders. The librarian himself does not really give a great deal of indication. He is aware that he has broken the Edict of Nicaea, and he throws himself at the Lion's mercy. The Navigator woman, however, says that yes, these creatures come from the Immaterium, and therefore our arts which utilize the Immaterium are also able to defeat them. The Lion seems very open to reintegrating the Librarians. In fact, it seems like that is exactly where he's going, with a great deal of deliberateness as well. He seems to be heading straight to the direction of, okay, right, well, it works, we might as well use it. To which Nemiel, you remember Nemiel, right? He was one of the main characters in the first Dark Angels books, voice his objections. He is a chaplain now, although he never really saw himself fitting into the role, which makes his harsh objections a little bit interesting. He basically states that there is no way he could possibly accept this. This is a clear violation of the Nicaean Edict, and there's no way he can go along with it. He doesn't make any threats, he's not aggressive about it, he simply makes his objections known in a, well, determined manner, I guess. Like, he's very stubborn about, like, no, you can't do this. And then the Lion turns around and punches his head off, killing him. That was fucking sudden. Okay. I mean, over the course of my time reading books, I've seen a fair few characters being Yeetus deletus by author on more than one occasion, but I think this is one of the most blatant one-sided murders of an established character I have ever witnessed. He just, over the course of like one line of text, the Lion goes from being very amicable, very interested in this, very calm and collected, to going, no you, and killing Nemiel. I would also hasten to add that Nemiel's been a very close confidant of the Lion at this time, and yet still just... And again, he punches his head. He was wearing his armor with his helmet, and the Lion just punched it clean. That's not a rebuke. That is straight up fucking murder. Now, granted, yes, the ship is, to an extent, caught in a warp anomaly, and there is mentions about how this might be affecting the crew, or making time seem somewhat out of form, so maybe the Lion didn't mean to do this, that he, I don't know, underestimated his own strength or something, but it's just such a ridiculously sudden death of a character that we have had no indication so far to be anything but a fairly central main character. I mean, him and Zahariel were literally the main character of the first book, and just dead. just dead. And dead for apparently very little in the way of actual reasons. I don't know, like, I don't want to say that this was just some kind of... I don't even know what the fuck this was, honestly, because it doesn't seem to make sense. Even if the Lion has been affected by some warp fuckery, alright, but to the point of murdering one of his closest lieutenants because he dared to disagree with him? This is not the Lion we've come to know so far. He's a bit temperamental, but fuck. Ferrus Manus would look at this and go like, dude, bit harsh. Hell, Petorabo would object. Angron might even go like, well, you know, I've killed a fair few of my sons too, but that guy didn't really deserve it. I don't know what this was, except, I don't know, future justification, I guess, for turning Nemiel a traitor? I suppose when he learns that the Lion just punched his friend's head off for no fucking reason. It's even again suggested that this may have been as a result of the warp fuckery, because after doing it, the Lion is like, oh, crap. I didn't mean to do that. And even, like, bends over his headless corpse and says, like, we'll mourn him later. Like, dude, you just murdered him. Yeah, this is a very strange part of the short story. And also, like, I feel like Nemiel deserved a little better than just having his head punched off in a short story, but... oh well, it's done now, I guess. The overall engagement serves very little, other purpose either. Once the Primarch has realized the nature of the threat, he quite quickly moves to destroy it, including a massive Tzeentch Keeper of Secrets as well. After that, they continue towards their primary objective, where they find the Iron Hands locked in combat with the Death Guard. This is where the Primarch's caution, the Lion's distrust, becomes apparent once again. His officer urges him to move in support of the Iron Hands because they are presumably loyal to the Emperor, whereas the Death Guard have very clearly declared themselves for Horus. But the Lion points out that this is not necessarily true. There are forces amongst the Loyalist legions, presumably, that may have turned, and there are definitely forces amongst the traitor legions that have remained true. And so until either side can make their goal and position here clear, the Lion decides to keep all of his options open, which, to be fair, is a good idea, especially concerning the Iron Hands, because, whilst I do not question their loyalty, of course, they have lost their Primarch, something that would rest heavily on any legion and might result in all kinds of interesting deviations from the norm. Luckily for the Dark Angels, there's not really that much in the way of forces from either legion currently in system, and the troops that the Lion has brought with them would be more than enough to deal with them even if the two forces were to join hands, which they are unlikely to do since both the Iron Hands and the Death Guard are locked in a stalemate with one another. And so, the Lion orders his fleet to simply move in straight in between both of these fleets and demand that they cease their fighting. And considering the Dark Angel's fleet outnumber both combatants significantly, and then the Lion fires a cyclonic torpedo at the planet, just to further emphasize his point, the Iron Hands are more than willing to accept, and the Death Guard less willing, well, they don't really have a choice now, do they? And so both parties agree to meet and parley under the aegis of the Lion. But the Lion actually has another idea in mind. He is using this as an excuse to safeguard the planet and to make planet for himself, to meet the thing that he came here to uncover. A living computer of a sort, a supercomputer, that had been able to enslave an entire society. And the first time the Lion and the Death Guard came to the planet, they cooperated to destroy this computer's little, mini empire. Ever since, the Adeptus Mechanicus has been poking its mechanical innards to try and figure out how it works, since apparently, I guess they assumed it wasn't an AI. See, that's kind of the odd thing, because if it was an AI, the Mechanicus would have destroyed it, so they must have some kind of distinction of this thing, like, oh no, this isn't an AI because something. Presumably some kind of warp craft, judging by the description of the thing, and a floating orb. They don't describe it too much, so I doubt we're looking at any kind of Uvath tech here. And it also mentioned specifically that it was designed to interface with humans, suggesting that this is an artifact of old, mayhaps even the Terran Federation. A bit unclear, really, because, of course, the alternative explanation is also that the damn thing is fucking lying. Apparently, the Mechanicus had tried all kinds of ways to interface with it, but eventually they tried to offer up a servitor to it, and suddenly, voila, the sphere could interface with the servitor, and is now able to move and talk through the body of a young boy, or... is young boy the correct term here? If the Magos is to be believed, and we should be careful about that since he's apparently a member of the Order of the Dragon, then the boy was just a servitor. And if he's a vat-grown servitor, then he's a thing rather than an individual, with Cole being one of those like, oh hey, I'm Belisarius Cole, I do things that is literally impossible on a day-to-day basis, but... most servitors are basically brain dead. They have no higher mind functions, so I guess it is technically a better form of reference, quote unquote. Then again, I hasten to add, Order of the Dragon. We only have his assurances that it wasn't a real boy. Pinocchio suddenly comes to mind, except somewhat more grimdark. And this version of Pinocchio has a far more amazing power than merely making his nose grow and telling a lie. This thing on the planet is capable of interacting with a warp in just a magical manner. Again, it reminds me a lot of the Uvath, but too many things don't quite fit. The orb is quite literally capable of just snapping his fingers and teleporting entire fleets through the void, and also translating personnel without even seemingly any real kind of teleportation problems. Normally, when people are teleported in 40k, they will feel a deep sense of vertigo at best and discomfort at worst, or, well, death at worst, actually. But no one the sphere does it. It's able to move Gilliman's ships in and out of the warp as it wants, without them being instantly overwhelmed by demons, by the by, since they didn't have the Gela fields up, of course. And it can also move personnel aboard the ships, into the warps, out of the warp, etc. This is a rather ridiculous degree of power, because it completely breaks how travel works in the 41st millennium, and so it is small surprise that the Death Guard and the Iron Hands want it as well. Indeed. Super weapons. I don't like super weapons. They always tend to be too super, really, but oh well. The Iron Hands and the Death Guard both come to the parley with the Lion, and they present their cases. The Death Guard want to seize the thing for Horus, or at least so they claim, whilst in reality, the Lion suspects that Typhon is playing a very different game, that he is not entirely Mortarian's creature anymore, and that is indeed correct. As for the Iron Hands, they are still loyal, but to a slightly different master, or at the very least via a different master. They are still loyal to the Emperor, of course, but their orders now come from Gilliman, who has created Imperium, Secundus. Gilliman had done this, not out of any sense of betrayal or want to betray the Emperor or screw him over in any way, which the Lion, of course, doesn't know at this point, but because Gilliman saw no other way to aid the Imperium at large, and so he instead decided to fortify the borders of what he knew he could protect, and therefore potentially rebuild the Empire. Of course, The lion doesn't know this, and so the lion is forced to assume that both Horus and Guilliman have essentially turned traitor. He then orders both of them to return to their respective masters, and he takes the artifact for his own and then bombards the shit out of the research center, ensuring that no other legion could possibly claim the power that was once there, or even just a hint of it. He then claims the sphere itself for his own purposes, and with it he aims to defeat Kurz. Now that his fleet will be able to move with a degree of maneuverability and freedom that Kurz cannot possibly match, he can cash out his fleets and he can destroy them. After which he will turn his gaze upon Guilliman and determine whether or not he is merely misguided or actively treacherous. We also get an interesting little revelation here of two things. First and foremost, Typhon was indeed not sent here by Mortarion, and when he tries to seize the sphere tells him, no, don't worry, I'm going to go with the lion. You've done your part now, off you go, and he teleports Typhon back onto his spaceship and well out of range of the Dark Angel's fleet, suggesting that the sphere itself is certainly not a friend of humanity, probably a friend to something far more chaotic in nature. However, then there's the lion. The lion is found deep inside the bowels of his ship, holding a conversation with something unseen, and he speaks some words that seem downright treacherous, suggesting that he is aiming for the mutual destruction of the legions. Although he does, how do I put it? He changes this up a little bit. He basically... He is not being traitorous in what he's saying here. He is saying that he will only accept the rule of the Emperor, and no one else. And if he must destroy the other legions, loyal or not, to ensure that, he will. He even has a grand goal of perhaps bleeding all of the legions to the point where they would have no choice but to accept the Emperor's superiority. Which is a grand goal, but considering the technology he just got his hands on, not an impossibility. The first and most powerful weapon of war, after all, is the ability to maneuver, and the Lion has gained a literally unrivaled capability within that particular regard. And then his conversational partner is revealed. It's one of the little dark thingies from Caliban. And the Lion shows no surprise at this. He speaks to it as if it was an old friend or ally, or confidant at the very least, suggesting that the Lion has known of the little darklings for quite some time, and has been actively working not necessarily with or for them, but at the very least his relationship with them has not been outright antagonistic, which is quite interesting. Then again, considering the fact that the Lion was in the jungles of Caliban for half of his life, until he then just randomly suddenly decided to walk up to a bunch of humans, not threatening in any way, and then follow them back home to their houses, well, if he was in league with the little dark ones all along, or in league is probably the incorrect term, but knew of them and cooperated with them, then that certainly would make a great deal of sense, wouldn't it? Additionally, the little ones are not like the Eldar. They don't want to see the annihilation of humanity or the Imperium. Indeed, they actually seem to be on the Dark Angel's side in this regard. They seem to be championing the Emperor's cause, although indirectly benefiting it from it themselves, of course. They also urge the Lion to return to Caliban, it would appear, but the Lion states that it is more important for him to finish this war, to destroy Horus and potentially Guilliman's rebellion, even if it ends up costing him his legion. Now, there is some strange nonsense here, however, as well. Again, Guy Haley's not a bad author, but he doesn't think his stories through half the time, I feel like. Because if the Lion actually does have a compact with the little darklings, then he's got a hotline directly to Caliban. These things are capable of acts of psychic might that is ridiculous. Like, they are described almost like a kind of hive mind entity, and at the very least, they're capable of communicating with each other in ways that we can hardly imagine. Are they bound by the same rules as the astropaths? Can they not look back to Caliban? And if they can't, how the hell is the lion then like, even if you say what is true, I cannot abandon the crusade now, etc.? Like, what is it talking about then? It seems to suggest that it knows what's going on Caliban, but again, if it knows, then why would the lion be doubtful? I want to return home, I'm unsure about what's happening there, when his little phone creature could just literally go like, right, yes, so, Chaos Uprising, Luther's got a hold of a naughty book, you should be real careful about that, and he's getting a little bit too interested in fiddling around with it. Also, he's probably possessed one of your dudes with an ancient monstrous entity. Yeah, it's getting a bit dodgy. Maybe you should go back home. This is a story that introduces a lot of interesting little tidbits, but also a lot of tidbits that seem to be contradicting themselves, which is a little bit of an issue, is it not? To the point where it's difficult to figure out precisely how much of this book we're supposed to be taking seriously. On the one hand, it would explain why the lion was able to bring Kurz to battle when he hadn't been able to do so up until that point, being outmaneuvered and due to the natural geography, warpography, I suppose, of the region of space, he simply wasn't able to trap the Night Lords because the translation in and out of the warp was so slow that by the time either side could bring enough forces to bear, the other side would have plenty time to just retreat. Okay, that makes sense. The introduction of a superweapon, basically, that allows them to warp around the galaxy, well, that certainly would fucking fix it, no doubt about it, but It's one of those hand-wavy explanations, you know? Oh shit, right, I've written myself into a little bit of a corner here. How do I get out of this predicament? Oh, I know. Deus Ex Machina, problem solved. Yeah, it's nowhere near as bad as the reflection cracked by any stretch of the imagination, but it's an odd story because on the one hand, it seems so inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, and at the same time, it seems to strive so hard to be important. Nemiel is killed, just out of hand, just randomly. The introduction of a mysterious superweapon is just introduced. We have Typhon, turning away from Mortarion, becoming a proper disciple of Lord Nurgle, or the Father, as he refers to them. And we also have the reveal that the lion is working together with the little darkling thingy-bobs. So many things are unveiled in... I don't know. It feels rushed on the one hand, but I think rather than rushed, I think poorly planned out is probably a better term. It's a very odd little book. Very odd little book. Anywho, that brings us to the end of the third short story, The Lion, leaving us with just one more, Rob Sanders' The Serpent Beneath. So, until tomorrow, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope I'll see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.